everyone, and welcome to Fit Chicks Chat. My name is Amanda Quinn.
And my name is Laura Jackson.
And today's podcast, we are discussing our reflection of the past year. So, we do this every single year. I think it's a really powerful thing to be able to talk through, to be able to share insights, to be able to just kind of go over what has been happening at Fit Chicks Academy, to share that publicly with all of you listening. But also, I think it's a really good exercise for us as well to remind ourselves of all of the work, of all of the things, of the successes, the challenges, the everything that has happened over the past year, because it's so easy to forget. It's so
Hmm.
easy to just be like in the moment or only remember the past couple of weeks or the past struggle or things like that, but not really actually thinking about it from like the entire scope of like all of the differences. It's funny, I was actually looking back at photos over the past year of like me and my family, and I was like, oh man, I totally forgot we did that. And I totally forgot we went there. And I was like, oh my gosh, I remember we went to Cirque. I forgot. Like, because it's so easy to just in your brain keep moving forward, moving forward, moving forward, and to not actually look back. So this is something that I really enjoy doing with you. I think that it's just a powerful exercise, and I think it really puts things into perspective.
Well, and I think too that, like we were saying, like we don't take a lot of time to reflect, and there's so many lessons that come in the reflection. Like that is part of being future focused or goal oriented or whatever it is that you should spend time reflecting on the past because that's where some of the best lessons are coming from, especially if you have big goals moving forward, but also just to really appreciate your life, right? Because when you're always looking forward, you're looking at, what you don't have yet, which also can create a lot of lack, as opposed to looking back. And you can look back with gratitude, you can look back with curiosity, you can look back with excitement, like all of the things that you have created, whether it be a memory or something in your business or your coaching or your clients. There's just so much goodness there, and I think it's something I know I struggle with. Like I always want to go to the next phase. I always want to just be like, hey, what are we doing for 2025? And it's like, hold on a second, we have to look back because so much has happened. And I remember earlier this week I went for a run and I was just looking for podcasts, and I just found, I was kind of like, listening to these little like 15-minute clips, and I kept just changing it while I was running. And one came up and it was Mel Robbins. And I don't usually listen to Mel Robbins, but she was talking about how she does her reflection process, which I thought was interesting because we were planning for this podcast too. And what you were just saying about going through your camera reel. So she was saying
Yeah.
one of the best things to do when you're doing reflection is have your camera there and pull out your highlights of the year, but by going through your camera roll, because there's so many little highlights and big highlights that you just don't remember. Like
Mm.
for me, I remember things from last year, but there's things that happened last year. I'm like, oh yeah, that happened last year. Like you were saying, it's like whether it be with my son or with my husband or with you, even like friendship or business wise, like it just has gone by so fast. So she was saying, like, part of your reflection process is as you're doing this, have your phone next to you. So you could be like, okay, what were my personal highlights of the year? And you can find them, right? Because they're
Mhm.
going to pop out at you. And there's probably going to be some that are going to really blow your mind because you didn't remember. And then like, what were my professional highlights? And you'll find them too. So as long as you took pictures, or maybe you didn't, and you're like, okay, well, one of the things I want to work on is taking more pictures.
Yeah. No, but it's so true. Like it's so easy to just forget. And it's so easy
Yeah.
to, for me especially, I find I'm one of those people that have, and you know this about me, but I don't really have like a really good sense of time. Like all time kind of blends into one space for me. It doesn't, I can't differentiate between like someone can say to me like, "Oh yeah, don't you remember in like 2015 when we were at this show and we were doing this?" And I'm like, "What?" Like in my brain, I'm like, no, no way. I can't remember any of that. I don't know when things happen. Like it's really like it's just not something that works well in my brain is like remembering timelines and things like that. So it does help me a lot to be able to look back and to be able to reflect, but also taking this time to really chat through it. I just think, yeah, there's so many things. And sometimes, especially in business, if you are in business and you're listening to this or you're a coach and you're coaching clients or things like that, it's so easy for you to just be like, oh, I feel like I didn't accomplish this bigger goal or I didn't do this. But then
Yeah.
you forget about all of the other little things that you did accomplish, that you did achieve, that have happened to you, that were super successful, that happened for your clients. And it kind of puts you into this perspective of like, okay, I actually, I did have a lot of amazingness that happened. Because sometimes we can just get
Yeah.
stuck with like the end goal didn't happen. So therefore I don't feel successful, which is not true. So
But I
I think
find this
it's
is
I
one of
think
the
it's really
most
good.
well, and I find this is one of the most fascinating things, right? About like having goals, and which is why so many people feel really overwhelmed like having a goal, because it's that space in between where you are and achieving the goal that is the most uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't have it yet. So you use it as like evidence as to why you're never going to have it. Like, oh, I said I'm going to get 100 clients by December 31st, 2024, and that didn't happen. But then we never look at, okay, but I started the year with 0 and now I have 10. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that is the space, like that's why reflection is so important, because it's like you are going to get to that 100. You're just still at the like a milestone, and it doesn't mean anything that you didn't get there within the year. You're moving in that direction. And I was having this conversation with one of our friends recently through Voxer, which is like a voice app. And we were chatting about like she was just feeling like I really frustrated with her weight. So she has been like working on this weight goal for such a long time, and just like her relationship with food and her relationship with her body. And she's like, I just feel like I'm not getting anywhere. And I was saying to her, I'm like, but you are. Like that's the thing we don't realize is all of the things we try that don't work are also moving us in the direction of what will work. So it's
Hmm.
like if you're trying a certain trainer, or if you're trying a certain, business program, or you're trying a certain weight loss approach that's, not working for you, but that is still moving you in the direction. Now, that's not what's going to work for me. Or you might think that is what's going to work for me, but I wasn't ready yet to stick to the habits and to follow the plan. So what do I need to do to get there? So it's just like no matter what, there's like even the things that are in the opposite direction of what you want, like you're still moving yourself in the right direction, if that makes sense. And I think that,
Hmm.
I know there's things in my life that one day it's like they showed up. So, like, I use the example with our friend about my eating disorder. And I was saying, I tried for so long to figure that out. I tried all these different modalities. I tried willpower, I tried therapy, I tried all this stuff. And like one day, I just stopped. And in the
Yeah.
moment, I was like, it's so crazy. I just stopped. I'm like, no, but it was a result of all of that work leading up to it that one day it clicked. So I just, I love talking about this stuff because I think so many times people are quitting right when the magic is brewing, but they don't realize because they can't see the end result yet and they can't see the magic. So they just are like, this isn't working, I'm going to quit. But it's working underground and moving you in the direction you want.
I was literally just going to say something similar. I was going to say that I feel like the reflection side is the side that keeps you moving forward because if you don't do the reflection, then you have no idea how far you went. And so it's so easy to lose sight of that. And I think even as business owners, it can sometimes feel like you said, your example of like, I don't have the 100 clients, but you're like, but you have the 10, and the 10
Yeah.
leads to momentum to build to the 100. You have to start somewhere. You have to start at some place to be able to build and grow from. But if all we think about is the end goal, then we think, you know what, my business isn't successful and therefore I should shut the doors. And I think that that's the
Yeah.
point. That's like, it's like the pivotal thing that people need to do is to reflect back and look back. Because if we would have only based our business on the big end goal and not on all of the steps, we would have shut our business down. Like we've had our business now for 16 years. We would have shut our business down after like year one. We would have been
But even
like,
for like
we were
for
like, that's
me,
it, not working. Even though we have, trained tens of thousands of people now over the years, we would have been like every year, we probably would have been like, nope, didn't reach the goal because we like to set really big, big goals.
but there's things too, even for me, like I still have to train my brain to not go to that place of feeling like things are not working when you have big goals, because it's natural, right? When
Yeah.
you're like, I'm still so far from this place I want to go. But then what I always find is funny is when you take a moment and then look at where you are right now and you're like, actually, there was a version of me that would have done anything to be where I am right now. Like the goals that I've
Right.
created now, there was a version of me who thought that that was impossible, which then, it like validates that the version of me now is creating the goals for the future me, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. So it's
Totally
like,
does.
I just feel like, even this year, so getting into like a little bit of a recap of this year, I remember, sorry, last year in December, one of the things that I had made a decision on was that this was the year that I was going to be really focused, like all in on our business, even though I've always been all in, but it was like that was kind of taking the driver's seat in my life. It was going to be like, my travel. We had joined a high level mastermind that was a very big investment, and not just an investment of money, but it was also a really big investment of time. So we went away last year. I don't even know how many times, for
Maybe
6.
it's 5 or 6. Yeah.
Yeah, for this mastermind, which, doesn't, when you say 5 or 6 times, like it doesn't sound like that much, but I have a 3, now it's 3.5, like a 3.5-year-old at home. At that time, he wasn't even 3 yet. So he's still at home full time. And then he just started going to school part time. But
Yeah.
that was taking away from time with him. It was putting more pressure on my husband to, take care while I'm gone all these times. But that was part of the discussion. Like that was the decision that we made as a family, that I was going to do this. And then on top of it too, it took away from my personal time, because I couldn't be like, oh, I'm going to go, away for a night with friends, or I'm going to, because I was gone so much for work. So I knew I was going into that with that decision. But for me, one of the reflections looking back now over the past year is how much I felt like my life was imbalanced, pushing more into the way of work than it was into me, who I am, what makes me happy, and also my family. Like I feel like I'm happy, but again, I'm happy I did it, because I wouldn't know if I didn't do it that I need to shift the way I'm doing it if I'm a part of a mastermind, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah, no, it totally does make sense. And I think we both felt that pressure. And I think it's, when you're saying too, like about the travel, it's not even just the travel away, it's also the amount of pressure when you are leaving for the work to get done before you go, and then the amount
Yeah.
of work that needs to be done when you get back. Because
Yeah.
when you're
It's like
away,
it's like you go away
especially
for a
at
week
this.
and it's 3 weeks, really.
Correct. Exactly. Because when we're away for a week and we're offline at these masterminds, we're not doing other work. We're there to work. And so we're so focused and we're so hyper vigilant about being in the room and paying attention and taking notes and really kind of, networking and communicating, that we're not doing the day-to-day work. And so then it really pulls us away from that. And then we have so much, like, our team is waiting for things, we're waiting on things. Like, we come back and we have like this catch-up game that we're playing. So we're really pulled in a lot of different directions. But again, I am grateful for the mastermind, and I'm grateful for everything that we've learned over the past year. And I think this next year I'm open to receiving all of it again. But I think it's just, I agree with you. I think that there is this place where it feels like a little bit of an imbalance sometimes. And we actually opted out because you had that surgery. We had to opt out of one of the
Which was
travels,
to
and we
me like
both
the
were like,
universe.
I know, we were like, oh, this is actually a good thing.
Yeah. It was the universe's way of being like, nope, you're not going. You need to stop. You need to slow down for a bit.
Yeah, you need to take a little bit of a break, a little bit of a breaky break from all the travel and everything else. And also, where we travel to is not an easy place to travel to. So it
Yeah.
ends up
But
being,
that's
it's a full day. It's a full day of travel in and out on top of that. So it's, yeah.
but that's the thing too, is that, and this is one of my lessons, and maybe even reminders, but a big lesson for me from this last year too was around how much action matters, how much
Mm,
implementation matters. You can go to masterminds and you can leave with notebooks full of things you're quote unquote going to do or should do or are going to try. But if you don't actually sit your butt in the chair and do those things, it's like that's when you start to feel like overwhelmed, because it's like you're not even to-do list, but like you've got to learn, apply. And it's what we say with our students too, right? It's like you don't need more information. You need to learn the skill, you need to apply the skill. You need to learn, you need to apply. Like you can't just be learning, or just applying. You have to be doing both. But it's like that was the one thing for me, it reminded me of how much action is important and implementation is important, because every time we go away, we would leave with these books full of stuff and lists of things, but then we'd come back and we didn't really have like a clear implementation plan. Like we're like, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And it's more like, I feel like that's something that I was trying to do all the things when I got back, instead of just being like, okay, let me look at these 5 things I want to do. And let me, instead of being like, I'm doing them next week, let me implement them in the next 4 weeks over the calendar. Or who do I need to help me to do this so I can implement them within the next 7 days? Because I can't put that pressure on myself to do it. Because then if I can't do it or I don't do it, then I feel like I'm beating myself up. It's, I'm burnt out. Da, da, da. So it's like that for me was
mhm.
a big lesson reminder of like what it is that I need in place and just how important action is. Like, and you could see it even in our numbers, right? Like our business would like, we'd have these like when we had more time, and then it's like, do things aren't growing as much. Then they're growing,
Mhm.
then they're not, you know what I mean? Like it was just very interesting.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think I agree with you. And we talk about, action-based things a lot. And that's actually why one of the things I think that we should get back to over this next year, because we kind of lost sight of it, in our business was, I know we've shared this on the podcast, a previous podcast before, but we changed the word of like, I'm working on things to actually I'm producing things. And I think that we need to get back to that with our team as well. So this is one thing that we've always implemented in our business. And for everyone listening, you might want to consider adding this to the way that you communicate to yourself or to your team or to whoever you're working with, rather than thinking of things as like, oh, well, I've got this to-do list and I'm working on all these projects. We changed the language to I'm producing, and we would list out the things that we're producing over that week. And so we would actually commit to like these things are going to be done by the end of this week. And it's not about like any kind of like harsh deadlines and stuff, but it's really about like looking at your skills, looking at your days, looking at your calendar and committing like, okay, I know for sure I can get these things done. Because also one of the lessons that I've learned, not even just this past year, but I think over a lot of years, is the idea that everything takes a lot longer than you think it's going to take. And so if
Yeah.
you don't give yourself the space to do it, but also things will take as long as you give yourself time to do. So in like the flip side of that is like if you say, I'm going to get this done in 5 days, it probably needs more time. Like if you're like, I'm going to build a whole course, it's probably going to take you more than 5 days, especially if you're going to build it really well and you want this to be like your signature program or something like that. But then at the same time, if you say, well, I'm going to give myself 6 months, then you're going to take the whole 6 months. So it's like be realistic with your timelines, but also don't put a ton of pressure on yourself to get it done. Like, I'm going to get it done in a day, because then you're going to feel that like overwhelm and that frustration or that. So do it in pieces. And we were talking about this offline. And this
Hmm.
is just the whole thing of like breaking things down into like smaller bite-sized pieces where you could be like, okay, I'm going to have my outline built by the end of this week. And the next week, I'm going to have my marketing plan built out for the program. And then the next week, I'm going to have my social calendar pre-booked out or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, and have, or I'm going to have all the tech built or whatever it is. But like, break it down as like a bigger project, break it down into by like smaller pieces so that you can then implement those things and produce those things over a weekly period of time. I feel
Yeah,
like
and the
that's
hard
a
part
huge
is
thing.
to actually do it. Like the self-discipline
Yeah.
to actually then so set the mini deadlines for those. So if you're like 6 months, I want to launch my course. Well, in the next, by Friday, I'm going to have my outline. And then by next Friday, I'm going to have module one mapped out. Or you know what I mean? Like so,
Yeah.
and then you have to be intentional. And like this is the hardest thing for most people, right? It's the self-discipline. It's the being because no one's going to force you to do the work. And that's where,
Hmm.
the mindset part of business really comes in, which for me, I think the more you give yourself time to overthink things, the less likely you are to do them. So like that's actually one of my other lessons too from this year because I used to do this is not allowing myself to ruminate or think about something for too long. If it's in my brain, I either have to do it or I have to set a date to do it. So it's like I was talking about this in example too. So where I live, one of our phone providers, I'm not going to necessarily use their name, but it starts with a B. It's like phone, internet, all that stuff. I literally said to him, sent her a text yesterday. I'm like, if you want to kill me slowly or kill me quickly, make me talk to somebody from this telecommunications company for an hour. Like it makes me crazy. And because I feel like you're just constantly bounced to another person. I
My gosh, you're put
can't
on
stand talking about
hold
this stuff.
for
Like, yeah,
so long.
it makes me insane. So I've been
I
putting off.
refuse. I refuse. I actually have my husband as he's the only person that's allowed to communicate. He's on all of our accounts like that because I'm like, if they need anything, I'm like, no. It took him actually 4 days. We were getting a new phone line and a new phone set up, and it took 4 days of him going
Yeah.
back and forth to the store. And I was like, not me, not my
Well,
problem. I cannot. I
I
was
was on
like,
the
four
phone
days?
for
That's wild.
an hour and 45 minutes. Like I needed to go for a long walk after this. But it's been a year that this has been kind of looping and lingering out there in the universe. Like I need, because there was this issue with my account. There was this pending order. So basically my account was frozen and I couldn't make any changes to it. And no one could figure it out every time I called. So a year ago, I just kind of put my hands up and I was like, forget it. I'm not dealing with this anymore.
I actually
I'll just,
remember when it
yeah,
happened. I
I'm
remember
like,
we
I'll
were
just go
away
with
and you're
it.
like, I can't. You're like, I have to
And then
deal with this when I get back.
yeah, and then a year goes by but my plan has been slowly increasing because as they increase and I can't do anything about it. So finally because I had decided that this is the year I'm going to go back to doing that of like I'm either dealing with things immediately or I'm going to set a time once I see it. I'm not allowing myself to kind of think about it till that time. I was like, "Hey, today's the day of the phone call." I'm like, "So, called, hopefully apparently by Monday it will be unlocked. We'll see if that happens." But it's just like even the amount of relief I had after getting off the phone that I had done it instead of every time, every week I'm like, I got to make that phone call and it's still lingering in the back of my mind. It's the same with your business, right? Or anything in your personal life. If you're just like, I've got to clean out the closet, I've got to, you know, I want to start eating healthier. If it's something that keeps repeating in your brain and pops up over and over again, it's something that you need to pay attention to, because it's just draining you of brain energy, of, you know, happiness, of all of it. So I'm like, when I did this before, it was crazy how quickly I started moving forward in my life. Like things started happening really fast. But again, it wasn't like I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna, you know, clean out my entire house. This is what we were talking about offline. It's like, okay, I want to clean up my entire house, but the first thing that's really bothering me is my upstairs hallway closet, right? And then I was like, no, this is what I'm doing today, is just that. And then every day I'm just trying to do for 30 days. This is actually one of my goals for January. 30 days, I'm doing one thing every day that I have been putting off around my house.
Mhm.
So it might be hanging a picture. It might be, you know, today I'm going through my shoes and I'm getting everything that I don't use anymore, sending it to Goodwill. Like instead of doing my whole closet, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do that. Because again, it's like these things that loop in my brain and they drain me. I'm like, no, I have to just keep, you know, I've been thinking about, I got to move forward on it. So that's also
Yeah.
been one of my reflections from last year.
Lessons. Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think those are really good lessons though, because they're things that we have to remind ourselves how we can move forward and how we don't want to repeat some of the things that we've done in the past year. And then we also have to think about like what are the things that we do want to repeat? Like you said in the very beginning, it's like we have to look at it from that both lenses. Sorry, my lighting is like going crazy in here right now. No, I don't know.
No, but it's
I think
like,
I think that
sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say they're all equally important, right? Like understanding what you don't want to do, what worked, what didn't work, and what you want to carry forward into the new year. I think for me, one of my biggest reflections for sure is just looking at things as like approaching things from like a different energetic state. I don't know if I can explain this well, but I feel like there's everything in your life is a choice. Every decision that you make is a choice. The way that you act or react to things is a choice. I mean, obviously, there's things that are going to happen that are out of your control, but majority of things, let's say, are a choice that you get to make. And I think one of the things that I've reflected on over this past year was there's times in business, especially in our business, where things are going really, really well. And then I'm like, my reaction, my energy is like super high. And I'm like, yeah, this is amazing. Because anybody feels that way, right? Like when things are
Yeah.
working, you're like, yes. Or like the other day, I figured out like some tech thing that was driving me crazy. And then when I figured it out, I was like, yeah, like I was so happy, which is fine. I'm allowed to celebrate in those moments. You're allowed to celebrate your wins. But when things are feeling like they're like, you know, you're doing something that you don't necessarily love, because in business, you have to do the things, especially sometimes you got to do the things you like, and sometimes you do the things you don't like. And that's just how it is in business, especially if you're an entrepreneur and for a small, lean team. I think the way that you approach things and the way that you approach it, you could come at it from two different lenses. And I actually have been trying to really catch myself in the idea of, am I approaching this from a place of like neutrality, so being very neutral about it, or am I approaching it from a place of like being positive about it, or am I approaching it from like a negative place? And really paying attention to the approach, because how I approach things, especially as, you know, one of the co-founders of the company and leading a team, how I approach something is going to impact, it's going to be a ripple effect
Mhm.
of the result that's going to come. Because I can approach someone on my team and say, I need this done now. And that would be like, oh, it comes out off as like a really negative. That's not how I approach things, but I'm saying that I'm giving you an example. Like I can approach it that way, and then it becomes a negative thing because then it's like, oh, that feels deadline. It feels rushy. It feels stressy. It might not get done right. It might, you know what I mean? Like there might be all these things. Or I can approach it from like, hey, I really need your support. This is what I'm looking at. What timeline works for you? And then it becomes like a really positive, sort of neutral place. So I don't know. That's something that I've been reflecting on a lot is like when I show up to meetings, how am I showing up? What am I bringing to the table from an energetic standpoint that could impact every single person that I interact with, whether it be our team, whether it be me jumping on calls with students, me jumping on calls with aspiring coaches, like me doing webinars, me teaching classes, whatever it is that I'm doing, how am I approaching it and how does that look? Because I think that that's just something from a reflection standpoint that I'm like, I could see the waves and I'm like, I don't want waves. I want it to be like the standard is that it comes off from this place. It always starts as like a
100%.
neutral, positive experience with every single approach.
Well, I think it's like a lot of people don't realize, which is why I'm such a big believer in self work and personal development and mindset work, how much your energetics and your beliefs affect your ability to grow your business and coach your clients, right? Like you could be perfect on paper and you could run a webinar or teach a class and do it in a way that's like it was executed to perfection based on the outline, right?
Yeah.
But if you are showing up from a place of, and this is something I've talked to a lot of business owners about, is the feeling of resentment.
Mm-hmm.
And the feeling of resentment towards the goal or the thing that you have created, again, when it's not acting the way you want it to act. It's like your kids. Like when your kids are not acting the way you want them to act, you start to feel frustrated, right? Like you start to feel like you're like, oh my gosh, can you just listen to me? It's like that same thing with business. And then eventually it gets to resentment, and you start to resent your business or blame your business or blame your clients or blame your future clients for the fact that you're not feeling 100% happy. And then that comes out when you're teaching that class or running that workshop following the outline, right? Like you think, but you're like, but I said everything that I was supposed to say. But we are not just like, as human beings, we are also energetic, right? Like the easiest way I always describe it to our students is like, when you walk into a room and you're like, there's just a weird vibe, like I don't feel welcome here, or
Yeah.
something feels off, or you walk into a room and everyone's like happy and no one's even talked to you yet, but you're like, oh, this is a good vibe. Like you feel that when you're in a space. And it's the same thing when you are, teaching a client or you're working on your webinar or whatever you're doing. It's like people feel that, and they feel that from you, which is why, like, and this again is one of my reflections or my reminders from last year. And then we'll talk about some actual moments too, I think, that like people can get some benefit from. But one for me is also the reminder of leading by example. And when you
Mm-hmm.
lead by example, you're being authentic, right? Because you're living the life that you're leading, and you're not asking people to do things that you're not doing in your own life. And also that like it makes it easier for you to show up from a place of authority because you're actually living those things. So it's like I talk about this a lot from the space of like confidence. Like if you're not, like, how are you showing up in your life if you're asking other people to do that? Like if I'm asking other people to, eat healthy, am I eating healthy? Right?
Yeah.
I'm not asking people to do it 90% of the time or like, 100% of the time, because I don't do it 100% of the time. And like what I teach is what I do. So it's like when I feel like there's like an incongruence with that, then that's when I feel off. And
Mm-hmm.
again, going back to that thing of me feeling like I was traveling so much, like I felt like there was things that my self-care kind of was getting up and down, because then I had a surgery in October, so then I couldn't work out for 4 weeks, and then it was just like all of these things that I just felt all over the place. But I just think that it's something that's like one of the easiest places to start is like looking like, what am I doing and how can I shift my actions into the person like I want to be, or the person who other people would want to learn from. And it's not about perfection. Like that's the thing. Like people think it's about being perfect. Like, oh, if I'm going to be a health coach, I have to not ever eat anything that's like quote unquote unhealthy. And that's not true.
Yeah.
But you can't be telling somebody, okay, this is what I want you, like, my recommendations are to eat complete in 3, and then all you eat is microwave pizza. Like it's an
Right.
incongruence in beliefs.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and energetically, you'll feel it, they'll feel it, and then your business will feel it. Like it's just a
Yeah.
fact. So you have to, and that's why I think it's interesting, right? Like when you think about when I used to teach our fitness classes, like our Fit Chicks boot camp classes back in the day, two things that I used to do energetically, I used to always sit in my car before I'd walk in a class and I'd be like, all right, check your energy. And I would sit there, I would always sit there and eat yogurt, banana yogurt. I don't even know why. It was like I would sit in my car and I would eat banana yogurt and I'd be like, okay, I need some like because I needed energy because I would always be teaching back-to-back classes and I'm like, I'm gonna be starving. So I would always eat this banana yogurt and I'd sit there and I'd think, I love banana yogurt and also I love my students and love all my clients and I just want to show up in the best way possible for them. And so I would really try to like remind myself energetically why I was there, why they were there, that they were trusting me in this process. And this was like a really big thing for me because then I could show up no matter what happened. If I was like stuck in traffic for an hour trying to even get to the class, which would happen sometimes, or if I had like a really stressful morning, or if I was working, because at that time we were still working our 9 to 5 jobs, and like if I was working and it was like a hard day at work or whatever, I could let that all go and I could just focus. My energy now is on showing up in the best way possible for them, right? And with high energy from my banana yogurt. So that was always the big, I don't even know why I used to do that, but I used to do it every time.
Ugh.
I love anything
The thought
banana
of
though, you
eating
know that.
yogurt before doing HIIT training makes me want to die.
I didn't eat a lot of it. I would just eat a little bit of it. But that was always my thing was that. And then the other piece is the authentic piece. in my classes, I still remember people asking, they'd be like, "Oh, like, well, what are you gonna, what do you eat after class?" And I was like, "Oh, well, today's Wednesday, and every Wednesday we actually eat pizza." Because that was actually like a thing that my husband and I did back in the day, was like every Wednesday we just ordered pizza. Like, I don't even know why, it was like the midweek thing. And they're like, "You eat pizza?" And I was like, "Of course I do." And like being really authentic. And then it allowed
Yeah.
for them to be their authentic selves and know that like it's okay to show up in that way. I wasn't selling them some false belief that like, oh, well, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna have just like a salad. Like I would always be like, oh, yeah, I eat salad with my pizza, so that there is a complete theory, there is a balance of it. But it just gave them, it's like almost giving them permission to be able to just be themselves and not feel like they have to try to reach some sort of like perfect state when the person who is leading them on that pathway. And I think that that's really what built community and connection with my group too, is that they felt like they actually understood who was leading them. And it
Yeah.
really felt comfortable and easy. And yeah, so I think adding to your point, I feel like it's such a key component if you're listening right now to just really show up in that way. And ask yourself, over the past year, have you been authentic? Have you been showing up, and have you been acting yourself in social, in classes, with your clients? Have you been consistent with that? And if not, how can you shift that?
Well, for me too, like, so, okay, I want us to talk about some of the biggest, like, personal accomplishments, professional accomplishments that kind of happened over the last year. And then also kind of some of the challenges too. So I can kind of start with, I'll go back again to like December 2023. So when I was deciding about, okay, I'm going all in on the business, all those things, I also picked 3 words for the year. And I talked about this on a way back podcast, and it was, I wanted to have more fun. It was fun, focus, and leverage. So we're going to do a second part to this podcast where we're going to talk about 2025 and what is our plans for that, what's going on, what we're doing for our goals, all of those things. But when I look back to that, it was funny because I feel like almost my world works almost like a year. Like I set the goal for this coming year, and it's like it takes the year to actually start to implement it by the end of the year. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like, this is what I'm doing in 2024, and I think it's going to happen on January 1, and it actually really starts happening in like October,
November.
November of 2024. Like, so those were my 3 words. And I think focus for me was one of them that I definitely felt like, okay, I was very business focused. And like some of my biggest accomplishments for last year was like launching the Menopause Coaches Club. So we launched our menopause certification November 2023, and then we launched our coaches club in February of 2024, which is absolutely incredible. So it's kind of like this continuation, because Dr. Cheryl and I were like, okay, in our menopause certification, menopause is so fluid and changing, and there's so many questions, and it's not like a black and white season of a woman's life. So we're like, how do we support our coaches and the conversation for their clients too ongoing? So we had this idea of adding on this monthly membership that could be for students and grads, or for people who just wanted to come in, like who are coaches who wanted to come in monthly and learn. So that was a big like launch, a big accomplishment for me, was getting that up. And now we've had it for, it'll be a year in February. It's been absolutely incredible. I think we have like 120 members now, and we're really going to focus on growing that. So I was really proud of that and really excited about that. And like the feedback we've gotten has been incredible. Also was launching our Holistic Nutrition Health Coaches Club. So we launched 2 memberships this year, which were huge undertakings. But again, once you have systems in place, then it's like, okay. And that is our monthly membership for fitness, health, and wellness coaches who want coaching materials, business support every single month. You could check it out on our website if you want. But that launched, and now we've grown that to, I think we have 570 members. So our next goal is 1,000, which I'm really excited about. So those 2 things alone were like standouts for me, as like, because as I was talking about focus, one of the other things that I wanted was leverage, which for me, like leveraging your time. So like we talk a lot about leverage in business, and a lot of people don't really understand what that means, but it really is like working the same amount, but being able to create more without like you working more. If that
Yeah.
does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like
Leveraging
instead of us
systems,
working more,
leveraging
so
people. Mhm.
yeah. And one of the major things we wanted in our business is reoccurring revenue. So instead of having every month that we're launching programs or launching our certifications, that we have something that is, growing month over month. And then also we're staying growing with our coaches like along the way. So it's not just like they're in certification and they're gone. So both those clubs are kind of keeping this conversation going and helping to support them, while also creating reoccurring revenue for us. So that for me was something I definitely felt like I started to work towards. But my challenge was I feel like I'm still not leveraging enough. I feel like I still do so many things myself because I know I can do things like one thing I think about myself is I'm a high producer and I can do things really quickly. So instead of outsourcing it or getting other people to do it, I'm like, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it. So I do feel like though I have created a lot of systems this year and started to offload a lot more and build up the people around us so they can start to support that. But it's definitely something that I felt has been like a challenge for me. But this year was like because of all the travel was such a reminder that like again leverage like the business cannot grow like just be precedented on you and I working.
Yeah.
That's not sustainable.
It's funny. I had a similar sort of, I think my win for this past year from a business standpoint, aside from like our memberships and everything, which are amazing, is also within the membership is that I told you when we first started the membership, one of the things that I wanted to commit to was, and one of the things I really missed doing was educating. And so I really wanted to be the person to kind of lead the charge when it came to the business workshops that we teach every month in the Holistic Nutrition Coaches Club. And that to me has been like so exciting. And I spend so much time preparing for them in advance of like being like, oh man, how can I like make this so freaking good that like I'm giving so much value? Because I mean, we've been in business for over 16 years and things change consistently and our business has evolved and changed so much, but we've learned so much and we're part of high level masterminds and we pay to be in rooms with people that are doing like high level systems and masterminds and things like that. And so it's taking all of that knowledge and condensing it into our workshop every single month that I can just be like, I'm going to deliver you so much information, but that's actionable information that you can actually use in your business. Because to me, it's such a huge give to be able to like give that information and to try to make it as quick and as easy as possible for people to absorb and use. And so that's been a huge like win for me from a business standpoint. I just really like it because it also feeds my soul and kind of fuels
Yeah.
me in that way. And I think the other thing for me is also when we hired our VA, like having somebody come onto our team that was really about support and hiring we hired two people actually, and then hiring them and going through the process of just really figuring out what their skills were, where their strengths were, and then really honing in on that. But again, like you said, I think one of the challenges has been finding a balance of like, how do we leverage this person's skills now that we know that they've been on the team for a while, how do we really leverage that person and how do we really build out a structure? And that's one of my challenges for sure is building out like a structured model of like, okay, this is what your week looks like. This is what your month looks like because I don't really operate that way. I operate in different ways, but I'm
Yeah.
a high functioning person in terms of like deliverables and all of that as well. But at the same time, but I know that that's the part that I have to work on from a challenge standpoint so that I can lead them better, to leverage them better, if that makes sense.
Well,
And
and this
so
is like
that's a huge thing for me, but I think it's awesome.
well, totally. And I think that this is something that, again, like every season and every year is like when you look back, again, the reflection part of it, like when you're actually looking back at each of the years and you start to see the changes that you've had. Like I remember, like, even up to like 3 years ago, I'm like, oh, I'm not a people manager. Like that's not my skill set. And I
Yeah.
actually think I'm a really good leader. Like I actually now feel like I am. I just have to get more, again, that's it, like getting more systems in place, getting more like even our hiring process now, I feel like we have it down. And who we hired even as like our new programs coach, program support manager, student support manager, she's amazing. And I feel like we were really nervous at first because again, when people start to shift roles and we had someone in place who we absolutely loved and then she's moved on to another role and still within the company, but it's like, are we going to find someone who's just as good? And what was really cool this year was we actually were about to hire someone and it just didn't feel like 100% of a fit, like both. And so our hiring process is, again, it's not just about who you are on paper. There's like specific things that we ask because we want to see what type of person you are. And also obviously working in an entrepreneurial environment is not the same as going to like a 9 to 5 job. So like the people were great on paper, but there was just something missing. And then, Amanda and I have been in this rodeo now for quite a long time that we know that every time that we have not felt 100% about something, it always ends up being an issue.
If
And
we
we've been
move
very
forward,
good
yeah.
at stopping ourselves now and like calling each other out. If we're like, no, we can figure this out. We're like, no, 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 no. Like we're trying to convince ourselves, we're trying to sell ourselves. It's like getting married and be like, well, they seem like a pretty good guy. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, maybe down the road I could like this about it's like, no, if this is an issue now, it's going to be an issue later on. So
Yeah.
it's like we ended up pulling back and then we actually opened it up to all of our students and grads, which was so cool to see all of the resumes that we got and how many people have taken our programs who are like, I would love to work for you guys. It's been my dream. I can't believe you're opening this up. So it was crazy. And it was so hard to just pick one person because we're like, oh my gosh, these people are so amazing. Like there were so many amazing people. And, but it was funny because because of the systems that we've created, but when we got to Lena, who is now our program support manager, it was like, it just clicked. It was like on paper, she was the right person. Her vibe was the right person. You know what I mean? Like it just felt right. And it's like that, though, again, is something I'm really proud of because whereas before we would have just hired because we'd have been like, oh, this hiring process is too long. Because that hiring process ended up being like over a month because there's phases to it, right? But I'm happy we put in that time because again, the investment of time that it takes to train someone and get them up to speed is so much. And like back in the day, we would have just hired someone to be like, okay, we got to fill the role. And then,
Yeah.
Probably 6 weeks later, I've been like, why did we do that? Okay, let's start again. You know what I
Yeah, and
mean?
like not vibing with them. Totally.
Yeah. Or not seeing it because, I've just had very honest conversations now. And then again, that's something that I feel like in my leadership, I've gotten a lot more of like being very true and real about, what I think could be challenges for them. And like, is this something you really want to be a part of? And then also checking my energetics and being like, is this something like, is the vibe there? Cause like, that's the one thing, and again, you and I are not like super woo woo, but we are very in tune with like vibes. We've always said this, like, I just get feelings and I'm like, and then my head tries to talk me out of it. Right. And everyone has their intuition, but it's like, I feel like you and I are both are very like in tune with that. And it's just like,
Hmm.
you just know, I always know things before I know them. I just sometimes don't do them. I sometimes just
Well,
don't
yeah,
do it. I do the opposite. I'm like, ugh,
sometimes we just don't listen. Sometimes we just don't listen, right? And I think everybody's falls victim to that, where we all kind of like you feel something and then all of a sudden you're just like, you think it'll be okay. It'll be okay. And then it's not
yeah.
okay. It's never as soon as you think, no, it'll be okay. It's never okay. Like there's never been an instance in my life that I can think of that I was like questioning it, went ahead, and then it's been okay.
Well, and it's also kind of like taking a step back and looking at, because sometimes too, again, like our brain is crazy and plays tricks on us. But it's like when you take a step back and you're just like, okay, why am I feeling off? And then like that was a conversation you and I had. Like, what is that from? Like, is it from like we're feeling what kind of vibe are we feeling? And we're both like give our version of it. And it's like it was interesting because we both had the same. And it's like you got to just kind of question it because sometimes it's like, am I feeling this way because I'm nervous? Am I feeling this way because I'm unsure? Or am I feeling this way because, I can't see this person in this role or I can't see this as my next step or whatever it is, right? So it's like kind of taking that step back to question it. But for me, like that's one of the things I do feel like it's kind of like I'm proud of myself this last year to see that involvement, but I also know there's still a lot of room for growth, but I'm not making that mean anything bad. Like I'm like I was talking to a friend of mine. She came over for tea last night, and she's just starting a new like high level job, and she's suffering from a crazy imposter syndrome. And I was like, just try. And I teach this to our students too. Like, change it from like I am now a VP, right? Which she's not identifying as that because she's never been one before. To like I am becoming an amazing VP, and just even that shift of like even to her team. I'm like, she's like, how am I going to show up for this team? I'm like, but you don't have to show up as this I am the VP, you can show up, I am becoming, and I'm going to become it with you. You know what I mean? It's like that kind of perspective shift. So that's where I'm
Mhm.
kind of at. I'm like, I feel like I'm becoming, like I'm on the way. Because for so long, it's like, we don't want a big team. I don't want to be a people manager. But I also want to grow our mission. I want to serve more people. I want to help more women. I want to get the word out more about women's health. Like, and that is going to require more people than you and me and our two people on our team.
Definitely. No, that's such a good reflection, such a good thought around it. Now, what would you say is I'm going to share my biggest personal, and then
Mhm.
we'll wrap this up for today because then next episode we're going to talk about sort of moving forward into 2025 and what that looks like. But so from a personal standpoint, I think my biggest accomplishment was again when I was looking back at those photos and I recognized that I really did stay committed. So one of the commitments that I made to my family was, especially to my daughter, was that every single month we would do some sort of an activity that we've never done before or go somewhere that we've never done, like went to explore, because one of the things that we both love is experiences and experiencing new things and fun things and just really exploring kind of our world, whether it be, far away or whether it be down the road, but just doing something that is unique and different. And when I look back at our photos, I was like, oh, that's cool, because every single month there's like images of us doing something, whether it was like we took a bike ride to the park and we had a picnic, or that we went to, a local farm and like went and checked out the farm and stuff like that. But there was all these different like exploratory moments that for me, all these adventures that I'm just like, man, like this is worth more than anything to me in the world.
Yeah.
Looking back at those and recognizing that that commitment happened, we have evidence that supports that and like proves that, but also just having that bond and that connection was so, so important to me to not lose that and to not lose sight of how important that is to her as well. So that for me from a personal standpoint was such a massive thing. And then I think the other thing is just having really hard/honest conversations with my husband about, and when I say hard and like honest, I don't mean like, it doesn't necessarily mean like it's like, difficult in the way of like our relationship. Some of them were, but some of them were difficult in relation to other things, like other family members or things like that. But just really kind of showing up and saying, hey, we need to just continue to have these conversations so that we can continue to move forward. That was a really big thing for me too, from a personal standpoint that happened. And then I want to continue to happen into the new year. It's just like always feeling like we're on the same page. And that, even if we agree to disagree on things, at least we're both understanding the stance that we're taking. Because I think that that's such an important thing. Because, I mean, it's a relationship, just like you and I have this relationship where you and I, we don't really have to have those conversations because we kind of think the same, but we do also have those conversations of like when we do our planning and we do the things, it's like, what's the vision? What does this look like? And we have to be on the same page. Because if we're not on the same page, our business would be like going in two different directions. It's the same thing with your life, right? And so I feel
Well,
like
I
our
think
life is now aligned a lot more in my house, which is nice.
Well, I think it's also like you and I, this is why I was like, you and I should have been marriage counselors. But it was like, because we always approached our business as a partnership. Like a lot of partnerships don't last, right? Because people are trying to live their own versions of their lives within the business. But it's like for us, we always saw it as like there's the business, there's me, and then there's also like our friendship. So there was like kind of
Yeah.
four things in the triangle. So it's like, okay, sometimes you and I might not be on the same page, but we'll come to agreement for the better good of our business. Just like in your marriage, sometimes you've got to come to an agreement for the better good of the marriage, right? Because we see it as an entity that's like outside of us. It's like, okay, this is our lifelong commitment until we decide both of us whatever is the next step we're going to do with it or grow, you know what I mean? Like, but
Hmm.
it's like there's times when you look at it through that lens, it's like, okay, we've got to have some serious conversations because right now for the good of the business we're not, maybe heading in the right direction. Like it's always really interesting to me. For me it was like one of my biggest personal things, and I think this is I wouldn't say it's like an accomplishment, but it was like such a big when we were at a conference in Vegas, and one of the guys did a presentation on regret, and I was like, I don't
Mm.
have anything I regret in my life. Like I was like, but it was this whole workshop of moving through regret, because again, regrets are just holding you back from where you like who you are becoming. And regret is essentially just wishing the past was different too, or like because you're just wishing you might have made a different decision, or you would have, maybe it's like you traveled to a different place, or you would or would not have had kids, whatever it is, right? Like it's wishing the past was different. We cannot change the past, right? We can only change the future. So for me, it was like I had this like massive breakdown at this workshop out of nowhere. I was like bawling my eyes out, and I continued to like bawl my eyes out when I thought about it for like 2 weeks afterwards. So I'm not going to get into all of the details as to what that was, but it has been one of the most fascinating things for me, because I feel like, okay, so this is going to like not get too, it might get a little woo, but people may agree with this or not, but this is the way I think about it. So I always think about like embodiment. Like when you embody something, it means like you are that. And we're
Hmm.
an embodiment of all of our thoughts and our feelings, our experiences, right? And it's like it's in your body, like it's so deep. And I feel like that workshop like stirred something up in my body, that the energy started flowing again. Like it had been who I was, and it's not who I want to be in the future. It's something from my past that I'm still living in, that I don't want to hold on to anymore. And it's like I woke up the sleeping dragon. And since then, I can feel it like energetically moving through me, and it wants to go. Like it wants to, like when you let it go and you're like, and then you will embody a new version of yourself. And that's how we actually like, they do so many studies around like how your psychology becomes your biology, right? Like how you can even become sick from your thoughts. So all of our experiences that we're holding on to and not letting go of, they define who we are, and we have to release them, let go of them, whatever that is for you, come to peace with it, move through it, whether it be, spiritually or physically, whatever it is. So anyways, I just have had, that was in September, and it has just been such an aha for me of how there, and I didn't even think this thing was bothering me. So it's like all of these things that have kind of been like that I don't need anymore, that I've been holding on to for some reason I didn't even know I was holding on to, that it's like you
Mhm.
don't need to carry that anymore. And I was watching, as Amanda, one of my guilty pleasures is The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City,
Yes.
where I
I
learned
was gonna
all
say,
about religion.
which Real Housewives are we going to discuss? Or 90 Day?
So, and I'm not even a big Real Housewives person, but I do watch that one. But
Yeah.
there was this conversation that she was having again that just really hit me. Like, this is the thing. And I'm like, this was what I was supposed to work through this year. She was talking to one of the other wives about, she was talking about this, something that happened in her marriage. And the other housewife was saying, like, stop beating yourself up, like holding on to this, basically, like not like beating yourself up, but also holding on to this. She's like, the toughness, you needed that toughness to get to where you are. Like, you're judging that toughness, like, your armor, the person you were, but you needed that toughness because, like, she had had a baby young, there was all of these things. But it was reminding me of my life. Like, I would not be where I am today if I did not have that toughness, if you did not have that toughness to overcome certain things, and we dealt with things the best way we knew how, when we dealt with them, right? But it
Hmm.
was like this aha moment that I was like, it's like I'm letting down that toughness, and I want to be more vulnerable, and I want to be more like vulnerable with myself, but I just had not even allowed myself to kind of go back there. And it was just like this major, I'm like, you don't need that. You don't need that anymore. Like, you don't
Hmm.
need to run the show. You don't need to be the boss. You can be the second seat. You don't need to be in control of everything. You don't need to be, always going after big goals. You don't need to, like, it was just this, like, and reminder for me of, like, that's my work still, is like, I always feel like if I'm not moving forward, I'm like if I'm not growing, I'm dying. Do you know what I mean? But like, just trying to stand still. So that for me was like my biggest personal kind of aha from last year. We had an amazing year. Like, we had so many students in our academy. We had so many cool new programs. We, put Effany in the vault as a test and took some space to focus on other things. And now we're bringing it back out for next year. Like, we've, worked with thousands of women. Like, it's been such an incredible year. And I'm just so grateful for everybody, and also for all the lessons, like all of the students who I've met and haven't met have taught me. Like, it's just been I feel like this year has been, it's like setting the stage for like some major breakthroughs this coming year. That's what my
Hmm.
gut feels like.
I feel like every year does that in different ways, and the breakthroughs come for the things that you need, right? And I think I actually feel like this next year ahead, and I know we'll talk about like future thinking in the next episode, but I do feel like this year ahead is going to have, we talk a lot about this where it's like, you're planting the seeds this year, and then the work you do this year is the results show up in the next year. And so I think next
Mhm.
year it's going to be a massive year for not only our company, but us, like personally, professionally, because of the amount of work and focus and dedication we took over this past year. And I don't think that that dedication and work will change in this year ahead, but I think it's going to feel different because it won't feel like as much of laying the groundwork. And we talk to our students a lot about this, where we say you have to lay the foundation before you build, because if you don't have a foundation, you have nothing to build
Yeah.
on. And I think this past year, even though we've been in business for 16 years, it's still like we're still laying foundations for new things. Every new opportunity creates a new foundation. And so I think this past year has been the foundational piece. And then this next year is going to be about the building phase of like everything is going to start to build and grow. And then the year after that will be like a massive, like this next year is going to be massive. But then I feel like then the year after is going to be like this explosion of like energy, because we know that like we're pouring so much love, so much energy, so much commitment to what it is that we're creating right now. And we're creating it from a
Well,
different place.
and that was like my motto too. I was said this so many times last year, and I love it, and I just keep reminding myself of it. It's like, I'm playing the long game. Like,
Yeah.
I'm in this for another, 20, 25, who knows, 30 years, maybe it's going to look different. But like, whereas before it was like, I always felt like, even December 31st when it hit, and it was like, oh, didn't hit the goal. And then you like beat yourself. And it's like, you would almost feel like you're starting from scratch, instead of being able to look back and be like, oh no, like, I have moved the needle. Cause even this personal stuff, right? That's preparing me for something bigger. There's a reason
Yeah.
this is letting go, because your business will only grow as much as you do. And if you are
Yep.
not working on those things, you will not be able to step into that next level of yourself that's required, right? So it's like, whenever I think something's not going my way, I'm like, or like, I'm like, oh, that launch didn't go well, or we put all this work into something and it flopped. And like, I just always think, I'm playing the long game. This is part of the long game. It's not always like up, 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 and up. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, tried that. Okay, that's not working. Why didn't it work? Let's tweak and go again.
What's the lesson? What's the
What's the
lesson to move
lesson?
forward with it?
And
Yeah.
sometimes the lesson is it's something so small. Like that's the thing. It's not this
Mhm.
big, it's just like, okay, I tried it like this, didn't work. Let me just tweak this one thing. And
Mhm.
I don't know, like that for me has been something that I think has been really calming for me, is just like it's the long game. Like I'm making
Mhm.
decisions now that will affect me in the years to come. And like that's what I always think about. Like I'm just like, I don't make decisions from like a short-term fix, a short-term perspective. I'm like, would building this program benefit us 5 years from now? Would building this membership
Yeah.
help coaches 5 years from now? You know what I mean? Like that's the stuff that the lens that we look at things through. And even like where I spend my time, I'm like, is this something I want to invest time in that I want to talk about 5 years from now? It's like our friend who was like, she
Yeah.
wanted to launch this totally random business that was not in line with anything she even like likes or does, because it was a market that was like really financially good and hot. And we're like, but do you want to be talking about this for the next 5 years? She's like, oh God, no. I'm like, then don't do it.
And don't do
Like,
it.
don't put all the energy in now, because there's no point in building the foundation if you're not going to keep, giving the energy to it.
Exactly. I know. And I just want to add, like, the thing about, when I was talking about the reflection of like the things personally, I think it really boils down to when I was talking about, the adventures, but then also the household. And I think it really boils down to the idea that I truly believe, like, if your house is not in order, like your home, where you live, where you sleep, where you wake up, if it, and not even just like from a organizational standpoint, which is also a big goal of mine for this next year, is like the organizational side, which we talked about offline. But if there's something that is like pulling your attention away, your energy away, if it's doing something that, and you're living in that consistently, it's going to affect everything else that you do. And recognizing that last year, over this past year, and like recognizing how not having those conversations or not coming to agreement about certain things, or recognizing like, well, no, we're going to come to an agreement that I don't always have to go do this and you can do that on your own, or things, just small things that seem small but energetically are affecting you, it will affect everything else. So I feel like everything that I've shared today is all about energy and like how it all, but it's like the actions are all based from one foundational place, which is it starts at the home. So it's like the way that my home was would make me show up in a different way to meetings, would make me show up to different things, to show up to webinar. You know what I mean? And so it all is a ripple effect. And so I just think I just want to share that with everyone, like as like a kind of like final thought that I wanted to share about it is just really look at where is your baseline and like where is your foundation here right now today, and how is that affecting every single other aspect of your life, good or bad. And you don't, I'm not saying you have to like burn it to the ground, you know what I mean, and start over, but it's like, what can you do today, small things to change over this next year, to make the outcome by the end of the next year or this year something that you want it to be, how, you know what I mean, so that you don't have to consistently keep things in the cycle. Because even if you're trying to like show up to a fitness class to teach and you're like, I'm going to be the cheerleader, but then you go home and you feel really drained energetically, or you feel like your environment is not representing the way that you want it to, or you feel like, you're at your wit's end with your kids and you feel like you're consistently like arguing or things like that. Like, find solutions to those things, because those things will affect the energy that you have here, even if you don't think it is. So
100%.
really look at it from a whole perspective, not just from look at it in pieces, but look at how it's affecting the whole opportunity of your life.
Well, and I've said this a lot on the podcast. I always say the most important work you'll do is first on yourself, then in your home, and then out in the world. And if you're
Mhm.
trying, especially for coaches listening to this, if you're trying to really force the work you're doing out in the world, or you're feeling like it's not working, just take a pause and then look back. Where are the
Yeah.
things within me or within, my space or whatever that's not in line with it? Because it's so easy to want to jump to there without doing that reverse work. So if,
Yeah.
you don't believe in yourself, but you're expecting other people to believe in you, like what we were talking about earlier about the energetics, it's like, it's never going to work. So that doesn't mean
Yeah.
that you can't have it. It just means you've got to start to work on that belief. Or, you're out there and you're trying to, convince people to follow a very strict plan, but you don't follow any strictness, right? Like there's like a disconnect. So it's just like taking that step back. It's something that's so powerful because it's so easy to think, well, it's out here, it has nothing to do with me or nothing to do with at home. These are two separate things. And they're not. They're not.
They're not. They're
Everything
not.
is reflective of everything. So
Everything matters. Yeah. All right, everyone. With that said, we are going to wrap it up for today. This is a long one, but I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope
a
this
little
helped you
personal
kind of,
action.
yes, I hope it gave you some insights into some things that you might want to look at and reflect on for your own life and for your business, for your personal, whatever it is. And if, of course, you are right now a coach, an aspiring coach, anyone who is interested in becoming a coach, and, as part of your reflection, you're recognizing that one of the things that you're missing is some of the skills, you can check out all of our certifications. You can go to fitchicksacademy.com where you can learn more about all of our programs, all of our memberships, our certifications, everything is listed there. So check it out. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you again next week on Fit Chicks Chat. Bye, everyone.
Bye.